massive silhouette of the Queen Mary looms against the night sky of Long Beach, California, like a dormant steel beast waiting for a pulse. Fog rolls off the Pacific Ocean and wraps around the three iconic smokestacks that once signaled the might of the British Empire across the Atlantic. This is not merely a retired ocean liner or a floating hotel for tourists seeking a thrill. It is a labyrinth of steel and iron that has trapped the souls of the dead within its watertight bulkheads for nearly a century. The salt air usually smells crisp near the water, but here it carries a metallic tang that tastes like old pennies and dried blood. Visitors often report a sudden drop in temperature before they ever step foot on the gangway. Built in the shipyards of Clydebank, Scotland. During the 1930s, the Queen Mary was designed to be the ultimate expression of luxury and engineering prowess. She was a floating palace intended to ferry the wealthy and the famous between Southampton and New York City in unparalleled comfort. Her Art Deco interiors featured exotic woods and plush carpets that muffled the sound of the churning ocean outside. However, the sheer opulence of her design masked a darker potential that would soon be realized when the world descended into the chaos of World War II. The ship would trade her black hull and white superstructure for a coat of camouflage gray paint, earning her a new and ominous nickname, the Gray Ghost. During the war, the Queen Mary was stripped of her luxury furnishings to transport thousands of Allied troops across dangerous waters patrolled by German submarines. She was fast and elusive, and she could outrun almost any threat that the enemy could throw at her. Yet her speed and size made her a dangerous juggernaut in the open ocean. It was during this time that the ship absorbed some of her most tragic energy. Soldiers were packed into every available space, sleeping in shifts on hard floors, while the ship zigzagged through the Atlantic to avoid torpedoes. The air was thick with fear, and the smell of unwashed bodies as young men sailed toward uncertain fates on the battlefields of Europe. The most horrific event in the history of the Queen Mary occurred on the 2nd of October 1942 off the coast of Ireland. The ocean liner was being escorted by a much smaller British light cruiser named the HMS Curacoa, which was tasked with providing anti-aircraft defense. Due to a miscalculation in the zigzagging patterns, the massive Queen Mary plowed directly into the side of the Curacoa. The impact was catastrophic, and violent slicing the smaller steel ship cleanly in half. The Queen Mary was under strict orders not to stop for any reason due to the risk of U-boat attacks. So she continued onward, leaving the wreckage behind. Over 300 men from the Curacoa perished in the freezing waters that day as the Queen Mary steamed away into the gloom. Survivors on the stern of the liner watched in horror as the broken halves of the escort ship sank beneath the waves. They could hear the desperate screams of the dying men calling out for help. But the great ship could not slow down. Those screams are said to still echo through the lower decks of the Queen Mary today. Many psychic mediums and paranormal investigators believe that the guilt and trauma of that event imprinted a permanent scar on the vessel, binding the souls of the drowned sailors to the ship that sealed their doom. After the war ended, the Queen Mary was restored to her former glory and resumed her service as a luxury liner for 2 more decades. She carried celebrities and royalty and politicians across the Atlantic, hosting lavish parties and gala dinners. Yet beneath the veneer of champagne toasts and ballroom dancing, the ghosts of the past remained active. Crew members began to whisper about strange occurrences in the lower depths of the ship, where the passengers were not allowed to go. Tools would vanish and reappear in impossible places, and heavy steel doors would slam shut on their own accord, defying the laws of physics and safety mechanisms. One of the most notorious locations on the ship is the watertight door number 13, located deep within the engine room alleyway. It was here that a young crew member named John Petter met a gruesome and untimely end during a routine drill in 1966. The 18-year-old was playing a dangerous game of chicken with the automatically closing door, trying to slip through the gap before it sealed shut. He miscalculated the timing, and the massive steel barrier crushed him to death. His broken body was found trapped in the door frame, a horrific sight that traumatized those who discovered him. Since that day, Door 13 has been a focal point for supernatural activity. Witnesses near Door 13 frequently report seeing a young man with a beard, wearing blue coveralls, walking along the grated metal walkway of Shaft Alley. He often appears solid and lifelike, only to vanish into thin air when approached or spoken to. Some visitors have described feeling a burning sensation on their skin, or the feeling of invisible hands pushing them away from the door. It is as if the spirit of John Petter is still on duty, guarding the engine room and warning others to stay away from the mechanism that took his life. The area remains one of the coldest spots on the ship, regardless of the ambient temperature outside. Moving up from the industrial depths to the passenger areas, the first-class swimming pool offers a different but equally unsettling kind of haunting. The pool is now empty and abandoned, with its beautiful mosaic tiles collecting dust in the dim light. It was once the jewel of the ship, a place of laughter and leisure for the wealthy elite. Now it is the playground of a spirit known as Jackie. Jackie is believed to be the ghost of a little girl who drowned in the pool decades ago. Although the historical records of her death are murky and debated, regardless of her origin, her presence is undeniable to those who visit the area. Visitors to the first-class pool often hear the distinct sound of splashing water off the tiled walls, even though the pool has been dry for years. Wet footprints have been found appearing on the deck of the pool, manifesting from nowhere and leading toward the changing rooms. Some people have reported hearing a child giggling or calling out for her mother in the empty chamber. Paranormal investigators have captured numerous electronic voice phenomena recordings in this room, with a childlike voice answering questions or asking to play. The atmosphere in the pool area is heavy with a sense of sadness and longing that affects even the most skeptical observers. The second-class pool has its own dark history and resident spirits that differ from the innocent playfulness of Jackie. This pool is also empty and sits in a state of decay that adds to the ominous vibe. Legend states that a woman drowned here under mysterious circumstances, perhaps murder or suicide. Her spirit is said to be much more aggressive and malevolent than the child in the first-class area. People have reported being scratched or shoved by an unseen force while standing near the edge of the empty basin. The air here feels thick and oppressive, making it difficult for some visitors to breathe comfortably. Another famous apparition is the Lady in White, who is often seen dancing alone in the Queen's Salon, which was formerly the first-class lounge. This elegant woman appears in a white evening gown that fits the fashion of the 1930s. She glides across the floor to music that only she can hear, seemingly oblivious to the modern world around her. Witnesses describe her as beautiful but melancholic, with a distant look in her eyes. She is thought to be the spirit of a young woman who died aboard the ship, perhaps of a broken heart or a sudden illness while traveling to meet a lover. The most infamous guest room on the entire ship is Stateroom B340. This room has such a violent reputation that it was closed off to the public for many years. The legends surrounding this room are varied, ranging from the murder of a purser to a father who went mad and killed his family. While the specific historical details are often debated, the paranormal activity reported by guests who have stayed there is consistent and terrifying. The room has been the site of poltergeist activity, with furniture moving on its own and water faucets turning on and off in the middle of the night. Guests who have braved a night in Stateroom B340 have reported having their bed covers yanked off them by invisible hands while they tried to sleep. Others have awoken to see a dark figure standing at the foot of the bed, staring down at them with malevolent intent. Screams have been heard coming from the room when no one was inside, prompting security to investigate, only to find an empty cabin. The energy in this room is described as chaotic and angry, a sharp contrast to the more sorrowful hauntings found elsewhere on the ship. It feels like a prison for a particularly nasty entity. The isolation ward in the ship's hospital is another area that radiates a sense of dread and suffering. This was the place where where passengers with contagious diseases were quarantined, and where many of them took their final breaths. The smell of antiseptic and sickness seems to linger in the air despite the passage of time. Visitors have reported seeing figures in old-fashioned nurse uniforms moving between the beds, tending to invisible patients. The sound of coughing and groaning has been heard in the empty ward, a grim reminder of the many lives that ended in these cramped quarters. During the war, the ship transported thousands of war brides who were European women traveling to America to be with their new soldier husbands. Not all of these voyages ended happily. There are stories of a woman who traveled with her infant only for the child to die during the crossing. Overcome with grief, the woman is said to have thrown herself into the ocean or died of despair in her cabin. Her spirit is believed to wander the hallways, weeping and searching for her lost baby. Her cries are a heart-wrenching sound that chills the blood of anyone unfortunate enough to hear them in the dead of night. Deep in the kitchen galleys of the Queen Mary, there is a legend of a cook who was murdered by his own troops during the war. The story goes that the cook prepared a meal that was so terrible, or perhaps was hoarding food, that the soldiers rioted and shoved him into one of the massive ovens. While this story may be folklore intended to scare new recruits, the kitchen area remains a hotbed of paranormal activity. Pans are heard clanging when the kitchen is empty, and the smell of burning meat sometimes wafts through the corridors when no cooking is taking place. The ship is a massive conductor of energy, a steel battery that has stored the emotions of millions of people over decades. Every joy and every tragedy that occurred on her decks has left a residual imprint. This theory suggests that not all the ghosts are conscious spirits, but rather recordings of past events playing over and over again like a film loop. This is known as a residual haunting. However, the interactive nature of entities like Jackie and John Petter suggests that intelligent spirits also inhabit the vessel, capable of communicating with the living. Security guards who patrol the Queen Mary at night have the most terrifying stories to tell. They are the ones who have to walk the long, empty corridors when the tourists have gone home and the lights are dimmed. One guard reported doing a round on the promenade deck when he saw a group of people in 1940s attire leaning over the railing and looking out at the city lights, assuming they were trespassers or actors. He called out to them. The group turned to look at him, and their faces were blank and featureless before they faded away into the mist. Another guard described a terrifying encounter in the cargo hold where the luggage of passengers was once stored. He heard a rhythmic banging sound coming from deep within the hold, as if someone was hammering on the hull from the outside. When he went to investigate, the noise stopped abruptly. As he turned to leave, he felt a cold breath on the back of his neck and heard a growling voice whisper, "Get out," directly into his ear. He fled the area and refused to patrol the cargo hold alone ever again. The sheer size of the Queen Mary means there are countless places for entities to hide. The labyrinthine passages of the lower decks are particularly disorienting. It is easy to get lost in the maze of pipes and machinery, where the only light comes from flickering bulbs that seem to fail at the most inopportune moments. In these depths, the silence is absolute and oppressive, broken only by the creaking of the ship as it settles in the water. It is here that the feeling of being watched is most intense, a sensation of eyes boring into your back from the darkness. Skeptics often try to debunk the hauntings as the result of creaking metal and wind drafting through the old ventilation shafts. They argue that the power of suggestion makes people see and hear things that are not there. However, the sheer volume of corroborating reports from people who had no prior knowledge of the ghost stories is difficult to dismiss. Children often see the spirits before their parents do, pointing at empty corners and talking to invisible friends. Animals brought on board have been known to growl at empty spaces or refuse to enter certain rooms. Renowned psychic Peter James spent years investigating the Queen Mary and claimed to have communicated with over 150 different spirits on board. He conducted countless seances and tour documenting the paranormal activity and bringing the stories of the ghosts to the public eye. He claimed that the ship was a portal of vortex that attracted spirits from the surrounding ocean and land. According to James, the Queen Mary is not just a haunted ship, but a supernatural beacon that draws the dead like moths to a flame. The vortex theory might explain why the ship is so active. It sits in the water, which is a natural conductor for spiritual energy. The iron hull acts as a Faraday cage, trapping the energy inside. The history of the ship involves intense emotions, from the fear of war to the joy of liberation and the grief of tragedy. All of these factors combine to create a perfect storm for paranormal phenomena. It is a unique environment where the veil between the living and the dead is exceptionally thin. Imagine standing alone on the sun deck at 3 in the morning. The city of Long Beach is asleep, and the water below is black and still. You are surrounded by the history of a vessel that has seen more of the world than most people ever will. You hear the faint sound of a piano playing a jazz tune from the 1930s coming from the observation bar. You walk toward the sound, but as you get closer, the music stops. The door to the bar is locked, and the room inside is dark. This is the reality of the Queen Mary after hours. One particular night, a maintenance worker was tasked with fixing a leak in a bathroom near the Sir Winston Churchill suite. It was late, and he was the only person in that section of the ship. As he worked under the sink, he heard the door to the suite open and close. Footsteps walked across the carpeted floor, heavy and deliberate, He called out, thinking it was a security guard, but there was no answer. The footsteps stopped right behind him. He froze, gripping his wrench, terrified to turn around. Slowly, the maintenance worker turned his head to see who was standing behind him. There was no one there. The room was empty, but in the mirror above the sink, he saw the reflection of a tall man in a dark military uniform standing in the doorway of the bathroom. The figure's face was stern and pale, with dark, hollow eyes. The worker scrambled out from under the sink and ran from the room, leaving his tools behind. He resigned the next day, unable to face the terror of working on the haunted ship again. The haunting of the Queen Mary is not limited to visual apparitions and strange sounds. There is also a physical aspect to the phenomena. People have reported feeling sudden waves of nausea or dizziness when entering certain areas. Others have felt a heavy weight pressing down on their chest, making it hard to breathe. Some have even reported being touched by cold, clammy hands, or feeling the brush of fabric against their skin when no one was near them. These physical sensations leave a lasting impression that is hard to forget. The Dark Harbor event, held annually in October, turns the ship into a haunted attraction for Halloween. Actors dress up as monsters and ghosts to scare the tourists. However, the real ghosts of the Queen Mary do not seem to appreciate the mockery. During these events, paranormal activity often spikes. Actors have reported being pushed or tripped by unseen forces, and props have been moved or broken when no one was looking. It seems the resident spirits want to remind the living who the ship really belongs to. Despite the commercialization of the ship as a tourist destination, the authentic atmosphere of dread remains. The paint may be peeling in places, and the carpets may be worn, but the soul of the Queen Mary is intact. She is a time capsule, preserving the memories of a bygone era and the spirits of those who lived and died within her steel walls. The preservation of the ship ensures that these stories are not lost to history, but it also ensures that the ghosts have a permanent home. The engine room remains the heart of the haunting. The massive turbines and gears that once propelled the ship across the ocean are now silent monuments to industrial power. But in the shadows of the machinery, the past is still alive. Mechanics who work on maintaining the ship often refuse to go into the engine room alone. They speak of hearing tools clanking against metal and voices shouting orders over the roar of engines that have not run in 50 years. The Queen Mary is a place of contradictions. It is a symbol of elegance and a vessel of war. It is a place of life and a place of death. It is a solid structure of steel and a fluid container of spirits. This duality is what makes the ship so fascinating and so terrifying. It exists in two worlds simultaneously: the physical world of Long Beach and the spiritual world of the afterlife. Visitors walk the line between these two realities. With every step they take on her decks. For those who seek to understand the paranormal, the Queen Mary offers a unique laboratory. It is a controlled environment where the variables are fixed, but the results are unpredictable. Investigating the ship requires patience and respect. The spirits here are not performing monkeys. They are the remnants of human beings with their own personalities and traumas. Approaching them with aggression or mockery is a recipe for a terrifying experience. As the years go by, the hull of the Queen Mary continues to rust and weaken. Plans for repairs and restoration are constantly discussed, but the cost is astronomical. There is a fear that one day the ship will be too dangerous to board and will be scrapped or sunk. If that happens, what will become of the spirits trapped inside? Will they be released into the ocean? Or will they cling to the scraps of metal as they are melted down? It is a question that adds a layer of existential dread to the ghost stories. Until that day comes, the Queen Mary remains a sentinel in the harbor. She watches over the city with her silent, dark windows. She waits for the next group of curious visitors to walk up her gangway. She waits to share her secrets with those who are willing to listen. But be warned, not all of her secrets are meant for the living. Some doors on the Queen Mary are better left unopened. The experience of visiting the Queen Mary stays with you long after you leave. You might find yourself waking up in the middle of the night, thinking you hear the distant sound of a ship horn. You might catch a whiff of old heavy fuel oil when you are miles away from the ocean. The ship has a way of getting into your psyche, of hitching a ride in your mind. It is a haunting that follows you home. There is a palpable sense of sorrow that permeates the lower decks, a heavy emotional weight that can bring sensitive individuals to tears. It is the collective grief of thousands of soldiers going to war, of refugees fleeing persecution, and of the tragic accidents that claimed lives on board. This emotional residue is as much a part of the ship as the rivets and the steel plates. It is the fuel that powers the paranormal activity. The Queen Mary is more than just a ghost story. It is a testament to the fragility of life and the endurance of the human spirit. It is a reminder that death is not always the end, and that the past is never truly gone. The spirits that inhabit the ship are not just monsters to be feared. They are echoes of history, demanding to be remembered. They are the crew and the passengers who never completed their journey. If you ever find yourself in Long Beach, standing in the shadow of the great liner, take a moment to look up at the bridge. You might see a shadow moving behind the glass, or a figure watching you from the wing. Do not wave. Do not call out. Just acknowledge their presence and walk away. The Queen Mary has enough souls on board. She does not need one more. The ocean liner sits in the dark. Water a grand tomb for the memories of the 20th century. The fog rolls in again, obscuring the hull and dampening the sounds of the modern world. Inside, the silence returns to the corridors, waiting to be broken by the footsteps of the unseen. The Queen Mary sleeps, but her dreams are restless and populated by the dead. And in the silence, the gray ghost waits,